This game could change single player games forever. I don't know what game that is. Probably it's Expedition. Expedition 3. Don't go into GTA 6. What do you mean don't go into GTA 6? What the fuck are you talking about? Another level though. Not gonna lie.
Now, the state of the video game industry might not be looking so hot, especially if you're paying attention and you look closely at the big AAA players, right? Some of the biggest game makers in the industry are constantly posting L's. Places like Ubisoft and EA are almost struggling to remain profitable in certain instances. For console fans, it feels like PlayStation and Xbox is in a bit of a slump with their first-party games just taking a long time to release. It feels like the cadence, you know, the gap between big first-party releases for PlayStation and Xbox, like the gap is just getting bigger and bigger. With the industry just kind of relying on acquisitions or remakes and remasters and re-releases over and over again. It seems like it's a tough time out there if you're one of the old guard of gaming. You know, the big monolithic studios and publishers that have been around for decades. There's the occasional outlier, like Nintendo, but for the most part, if you're just a casual observer of the big AAA games industry, the only rational takeaway from 2025 is that things are pretty messy. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, though. There's hope out there. Every so often, something comes around, with mid-level publishers stepping up and indie studios pushing the boundaries and actually finding some really good success. And in 2025, we've got brilliant Game of the Year level stuff like puzzle game The Blueprints, Look Outside, and most recently here, the topic of this video, the expectation-shattering, Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
Bro, what?
Games like these are the vanguard of a changing games industry, one that is making games that people actually really want to play, created by a smaller, passionate team of developers with real artistic vision. Rather than, you know, making massive overbloated things or designed by committee or overly audience tested, crowd tested, whatever you want to play type things. Or games being greenlit and approved by executives that just don't understand gaming. It feels like newcoming developer Sandfall Interactive, the developers of Clair Obscur, didn't make a game because they were chasing a trend. They made a game because they loved games and wanted to make something inspired by their favorites. There are tons of small game devs making the games they want to make all the time. But the difference with Expedition 33, right, is that it just feels bigger. It's a French studio, so I apologize in advance for botching some of the French pronunciations here, but Guillaume Broche, the head of Sandfall, wanted to make the next Final Fantasy. And not just any Final Fantasy, one from the height of Square's power, like a highly cinematic, turn-based RPG with state-of-the-art graphics and all-star voice cast, and a score to rival some of the best video game soundtracks of all time. Well, look, I don't know for sure if that was their original plan, but that's definitely what they ended up with. Look, we've said it before. I did the before you buy for this game. I've been talking about this game for months. We can't overstate just how impressive Clair Obscur is. Not just for what is essentially, in some instances, kind of categorically an indie game, but for anything, really. It rivals anything put out by your traditional, massive 600-person AAA team, and they managed to do it with around 34 people at Sandfall, and most importantly, a couple dozen more from support studios. It may not be the legendary, like, just 30 developers bandied about sometimes, but it's still a relatively small team. Markedly different from your average AAA development studio and massive corporate structures. Like, they managed to make this thing from concept to release in 5 years. Clair Obscur is just a remarkable game in many ways, and the way it manages to combine AAA production values with indie game innovation is astounding. This is a game that could change single-player games forever. So again, check out my Before You Buy I did if you want like the full in-depth critical analysis, but you know, if you're just stopping by here, briefly, Cliff Notes, what the heck is Clair Obscur? It's kind of a JRPG, or a heavily inspired JRPG, in the vein of things like Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger, but also things like Lost Odyssey or Legend of Dragoon, with, you know, a dash of From Software influences here and there in terms of art design and bosses. Look, the setting is as bizarre as it is fascinating. It starts off in the city of Luminaire, where every year a being known as the Paintress wakes up and changes the number on this massive monolith, and everybody over the age of that number dies. So every year, the city sends out an expedition to try and stop all this, and every year they fail. You're part of Expedition 33, and you travel to the mainland full of impossible landscapes and weird, strange monsters on this impossible quest to save the world before all human life is just systematically extinguished year by year. The Final Fantasy inspiration is obvious, from the matching expedition outfits that are reminiscent of Final Fantasy's Type 0 to the core plot of going on a world-spanning adventure to stop a seemingly...
Game reviews would be sick though, but you need to be tapped in. You feel me? Like you really need to play. Like really play. You know our disadvantage. My disadvantage is I'm still on PC only, so I can't really like spread my wings and fly. And I really want to fly these days, bro. I ain't want to lie, bro. I've been coming up and formulating ways of getting their Xbox. I need it before the end of this year. You feel me? I see it before the end of this year. Say it with me, chat. I see it. You feel me? Because when GTA 6 drops, I don't need no problems, nigga. You feel me? The last thing I need is me sitting back and watching someone else play that shit. I can watch you play it, but I also need to be able to tap in on my own accord and be able to do my own thing. You feel me? We crying together, gang. Shit, I don't want to cry no more, nigga. I'm sick and tired of crying, nigga. Dang. 2026.
Inevitable existential threat, really like in Final Fantasy X. You know, the Paintress kind of essentially being Sin here. The classic JRPG comparisons don't stop. Enemies encountered are turn-based, and at first glance look like they're right out of the RPG playbook. Same for the game's progression. You explore dungeon-like locations, you wander around an overworld with appropriately tiny characters, you're visiting towns, you're doing some shopping, you're talking to quirky NPCs and weird creatures. The inspirations are obvious and clear, and yet the game still manages to have its own unique identity. It doesn't feel like a collection of inspirations. It feels like something new and exciting, but if you're a game fan, you can just tell where it's all come from. Part of that comes down to the challenging combat that integrates real-time elements with the turn-based stuff. It's far from the first game to do this. You know, games like Super Mario RPG and more obscure things like Shadow Hearts were doing similar types of weird combat things years ago, but the difference here is how they did it, turning the usual timing-based defense from Paper Mario into almost a full-blown Sekiro-like parry mechanic is inspired. You need so much precision here. You gotta be a sweaty gamer for this turn-based RPG. And then it's got a dash of like Persona 5 inspired gun mechanics. Like I said, all these ideas come from somewhere, but how they put them together all is brilliant. The abilities of each character are also very deliberately designed. They feel like something out of a card-based roguelike with how complex each character's abilities synergize with themselves and other party members. There's a layer of strategy to the battles that keeps things engaging, but doesn't bog things down. If you like playing the Xenoblade games and you like stacking damage and getting massive damage numbers, you can do a lot of that here. It helps that there's actually not that much combat in the game. They smartly give you more to do in each area outside of just fighting stuff. And that's like a satisfying level of exploration, some light, kind of messy platforming, stuff to grapple up to, little hidden secrets to find, things to climb, optional, super challenging enemy encounters hidden around. Most of the surprising things about Clair Obscur is just how accomplished it all feels. It's so well-paced compared to other RPGs that tend to just drag on forever. This one keeps things moving while still giving enough time to the characters to really make them memorable and really let everything breathe. It's a perfect balance. It really can't be understated just how much the presentation also helps boost the game. It would still be really good if all the characters just talked with cutouts and text boxes, but the fully animated story sequences and stuff, which are numerous,
am I a sweaty gamer? Hell yeah!
As much as we all say that graphics don't matter, when you're talking about a cinematic, story-driven game like this in a new world, the presentation is kind of important, and they knocked it out of the park on their first try. The story behind Clair Obscur, to me, just reads like one of talented people coming together to do something that they really wanted to do. It all started with, you know, the lead developer I mentioned before, Guillaume Broche, who was apparently bored with his job at Ubisoft. He apparently wanted to make the kinds of games that he wanted to play, the sort of thing that wouldn't really get greenlit at a place like Ubisoft. So he took the risky option of starting up his own studio, which eventually became Sandfall Interactive. And before even leaving Ubisoft, he was putting together ideas and apparently kind of forming a team or a group. Many of the people that ended up working on the game were just people he messaged on Reddit. the lead writer was originally just someone who auditioned for a voice acting role for the game's initial demo. The game's main composer was just a guy posting his music to SoundCloud with no industry credits, really. For many, this was their first time making a game. And when funding did eventually come in, when people and investors saw the vision, one admirable thing about Brosh is that he did try to do things right. And by that, like, it looks like they tried to foster a positive work environment. They got a big studio office, they had a garden, they played games on their break, and it sounds like a positive experience. It just goes to show that the right people and the right environment and the right leadership can just do things that some big developers struggle with. I think one of the most important things about the story of Clair Obscur here is that there was a solid vision for the game right from the start. In contrast to recent big budget gaming disasters or even movies where you read about them and it feels like they were just making things up on the fly and pivoting to whatever was popular at that moment, resulting in a bunch of half-baked, mediocre, undercooked products, Clair Obscur just feels like it had that focus from the start. Look, we're not here to trash any more on AAAs, but games like this show how effective a small team with proper leadership and management can be, especially in the current environment, where there are many tools that make game development easier. It used to be that only the most massive studios could make games look that good. That technology was only available to those with the connections and, of course, the capital, the cash backing to use and license all of these gameplay engines, these graphical things, Now, this sort of technology is more accessible to a lot more people, and it seems like it's cheaper and easier to access than ever. For as much as there is to complain about in the tech space, the democratization of development tools and assets and stuff has just been a real boon for game developers of all sizes. Without Unreal Engine 5, there probably wouldn't be a Clair Obscur, at least not in its current form. Look, we now live in an age where indie developers can potentially make games just as impressive as the biggest, most expensive games out there, or at least readily compete with them. They may not quite reach the level of the most groundbreaking graphics out there, but these smaller developers can get pretty close. And the reality is, I guess, for a lot of mainstream audiences, better graphics can mean more universal appeal, which means that these games, which would otherwise be relatively niche, can reach a wider audience. And with the help,
this nigga's such a bum. He probably has his phone. He probably watching the stream, Chad. He probably watching the stream, and he got this motherfucker like this, just so he can see my motherfucking face. He a bitch ass nigga. Oh God, man, Chad, this nigga got this shit like this. Like, oh, what is it doing? Ooh, I can see his teeth. Come on, nigga. Calm down, cuz. Like, oh God, bro.
Of stuff like Game Pass, Steam, PlayStation Plus, wherever, even a French indie JRPG thing like this can find unprecedented success and sell over 1 million copies in its first week. So again, even though a lot of the game industry is gloom and doom, just acknowledge that that happened. That's a good thing. Interestingly enough, too, it's not just beating games in its own genre, it's outpacing even more recent mainstream stuff like the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered. Everyone assumed that game's shadow drop was going to eat Clair Obscur's lunch, but it actually turned out to be the opposite. Nice. There aren't concrete numbers for sales yet, but if you look at the concurrent player counts on Steam, Oblivion's currently got around 65,000 players at the time of making this video, which is impressive, but Clair Obscur's got over 100,000 players concurrently. That's wild, but it just goes to show what positive word of mouth can do for a game. Ultimately, what does Clair Obscur's success mean for the future of the game industry? It's not a starting point. I don't see a revolution happening overnight because of this one game, but it is another data point in a growing theory that the industry is in for some big shakeups in the future. Many smaller developers and AA studios are stepping up where the big boys are failing. Studios like EA and Ubisoft have kind of grown complacent and almost out of touch with the average player. Clair Obscur is a revolutionary game, not just because it managed to make people excited about JRPGs again, or at least, the mainstream people that weren't jumping into your Xenoblades or your Personas or your Metaphor ReFantasios more recently, but beyond that. Really, the big thing is that it's just like what its success means for the industry as a whole. In the next few years, we think, certain seemingly untouchable publishers will become a little bit of a shadow of what they once were, unless they, you know, really change their tune. Ultimately, I think the biggest thing about Expedition 33 is that it proves what a lot of gamers online have been begging for and just really supporting for years, right? The stuff we talk about here at GameRanks, the stuff I like to play. What is that? Look, people love Fortnite, Madden, Call of Duty, whatever. But for a lot of us out there, it comes down to great, well-made, entertaining, single-player games, ethically made, they respect the player, they're new, it's not a rehash of old IP or a sequel, but just a completely new and ambitious thing that swings for the fences, doesn't have any microtransactions or nonsense, and is at a reasonable price, with Clair Obscur in the US being $50 US. Look, I said this in the before you buy, I think, but like people who complain about the game industry and the problems in it, Expedition 33 is a good example of like what we do actually want. It's important to celebrate the things we do want. So while the title of this video, like, could this thing change single player games forever? I don't know, but like, could it change the game industry? Yeah, probably. Again, it's a data point in what seems to be a growing theory. Just good old fashioned, simple, good, well-made games that show us something new and excite us. Because at the end of the day, and this has been my mission as a content creator for 10 years, man, it's about fun. Right? That's why we came here in the first place.
No cap.
So thanks to Expedition.
That's what gaming's all about, nigga. Having fun. And if you can't have fun and it gets too technical and it's all wow, you gotta think, nah, it ain't gaming no more, nigga. That's something out. That's something else. Time out. Question mark, nigga. Yeah, time out.
33 for that, at least. But this has been a long, rambly video, so let us know what you guys think in the comments. Are you happy with Expedition 33? Is this up your alley? Is this your type of thing? Even if it's not, how do you feel about a game being made with a smaller group of people for an affordable price that's a complete new, fresh IP? Let's talk about that. If you got any other examples of studios doing it right, like, let people know in the comments. There's a lot we can talk about this. The gloom and doom, the good stuff, anything at all, hit us in the comments. If you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We really appreciate it. And if you're new, consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys.
Tough. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. Expedition 33 is actually like quite a cool game, but personally, I still won't play it. You feel me? It looks a bit complicated, but probably if I played it, like really played it, I'll probably be into it. Why you acting nonchalant? W video. Man, bro, ain't nobody acting nonchalant, bro. I been mean all the time, bro. Now I say, nigga thinks I'm on some order farming shit. Like, you chat. Who gives a fuck, bro? Who gives a fuck? Who gives a flying fuck? Alright. It's about time that I leave because I can hear this ghost screaming in my room, man. You know.